So this woman, her name's Luz, and one day she's at home and her husband is outside fixing a car for his cousin. But then suddenly, kaboom! Their house catches on fire, and Luz is inside and she's terrified because she has 3 kids in the house. So she sends her older 2 kids outside to safety, and then she runs straight upstairs to where her newborn baby daughter is sleeping in her crib. And we'll call the newborn. Anyway, Luz runs upstairs and there's smoke everywhere and she's starting to get burned, but she powers through it. She refuses to leave Newborn. But when Luz gets to Newborn's room, Newborn's crib is empty. And Luz panics. I mean, this can't be possible. Newborn was just in there sleeping. But unfortunately, Luz can't stay any longer. Like, the fire is burning her face and the smoke is just becoming too overwhelming. So she has to leave the building for her own safety. And then finally, the fire department gets there and they start putting out the fire. And eventually they're able to check the building and they have some terrible news. Newborn didn't make it. Everything in that area of the house was completely burned up beyond recognition. And Luz is just heartbroken. I mean, she can't believe it. Like, Newborn is gone. And sadly, she has no other option but to just grieve and go on with her life. Until 6 years go by, and Luz is at a birthday party for one of her friend's kids. And it's like one of those parties where there's a bunch of little kids there. And Luz sees this little girl. That little girl has a dimple. And Luz is like, wait a minute, that's exactly like my dimple. And Luz can't help but notice this little girl looks a lot like her and like her other kids. And she is positive that little girl is somehow Newborn. I mean, Newborn wasn't in her crib 6 years ago when that fire started. Plus, firefighters never found the body. The area was burned up beyond recognition. So somehow Newborn must have got out. I mean, this has to be her. Now, Luz knows she can't just run over and snatch this little girl up in front of everyone. I mean, someone brought her there. That might look kind of weird. So Luz needs to be slick. She needs definitive proof that this is Newborn. So she calls the little girl over and she tells her, hey, you've got gum stuck in your hair. And then Luz pretends to get the gum out. While she's there, she low-key yanks out 5 strands of hair from this little girl's head and she puts it into a plastic bag. Luz wants to use these hairs to test the little girl's DNA. But the problem is, police closed her case years ago, so they're not going to agree to this. So she reaches out to a state representative. This guy, Representative Cruz. So Luz gets a meeting with Cruz and she goes to his office and for an hour and a half she pleads for him to help her. And eventually he gives in and he passes the hair on to the district attorney. District attorney opens an investigation, gets the hair tested, and sure enough, Luz is right. That 6-year-old girl at the party is actually Newborn. So, how did Newborn go from being in a crib during a house fire to being at a kid's birthday party 6 years later? Okay, so here's what really happened. So this woman, her name's Carolyn. So Carolyn is allegedly pregnant, or at least that's what she tells everyone. Apparently she's not. She just likes to tell people she is. The problem with that is pretty soon people are gonna know she's lying when 9 months go by and she doesn't produce a baby. But then one day the brakes on Carolyn's car go out. And so she takes the car to her cousin's house to get it fixed. Now her cousin is a very distant cousin. By marriage, she doesn't even really know him all that well. But he is a mechanic. His name's Pedro. So Carolyn goes to Pedro's house to get her brakes fixed, and while she's waiting, she waits in Pedro's house where his wife is. His wife is this woman, Luz. So while she's there, Carolyn notices Luz has a newborn baby sleeping in a crib. And Carolyn desperately wants that baby. So when Carolyn's car is done being worked on, she pretends to leave. But she also secretly sets Pedro and Luz's house on fire. And while Pedro and Luz are scrambling, Carolyn sneaks into Newborn's room and she steals her out of the crib. Then she takes Newborn home with her across state lines and she tells everyone, hey look, I had my baby. And she raises Newborn as her own. 6 years later, she takes Newborn to a family member's birthday party. And Luz just happens to be there and she just happens to recognize her own daughter. Anyway, police eventually arrest Carolyn, here's her mugshot, and she's charged with kidnapping and a bunch of other stuff, and she's found guilty and she's sentenced to a minimum of 9 years in prison, a maximum of 30 years in prison. And after all was said and done, Newborn was ultimately reunited with Luz and was raised by her. The good ending. Shout out to Philadelphia, New Jersey.